So topic number 2 is the war within ourselves, motivation, doubt, and how to use them properly. This is one that I think I'm all too familiar with. I have lots of, huge spikes of, I'm really motivated. I feel on top of the world, cloud nine. I'm ready just to conquer it all. And then I hit the really low lows where there's, basically crippling doubt. And when I mean doubt, I mean self-doubt, as well as, whatever else might be, out in the world of, is what I'm doing the right thing? Am I making the right content for people? Am I playing, am I giving a high enough artistic standard for my audience members? And I think this also ties in with practicing of what we talked about for last week's video, which is, when we're practicing, we have to be self-critical, but we also have to be careful about how much of that we are using.
Yeah. One of the greatest sayings, I'm not sure who said it, but I remind myself of it all the time, is that the biggest battle is in the mind. It's a battle that we face on a daily basis. And most of the times, things that we worry about, they do not actually exist in the physical world. They are just simply thoughts and perhaps even delusions in our own minds. When we transcend this duality of good and short of being good, and just allow things to happen as they are, I think then we're able to have a clearer vision of really what we're trying to, what we are, the reasons of us being placed on this planet. Of course, we have to practice. Of course, we have to look deep into ourselves to find our true talents. Of course, we have to delve deep into the study, visit our teachers, feel the progression, feel the development. However, if we begin to cling on to being good or being bad, what's going to happen is we're going to enter this kind of a cycle where it becomes a never-ending process of no satisfaction.
Yeah.
So it's important, I think, to realize the battle is in the mind, and try to transcend this goodness, this duality of whether it be good or not good enough, and just accept things compassionately, accept things as they are. And again, this goes back to the practice, the idea of perfecting one's ability and aiming at simply being in a way that is, I think, compassionate and loving, where others, as in addition to us, find joy in what we're doing. Mm-hmm. So, there's no need to beat one on the head, oneself on the head, and keep saying that, we're not good enough. So how do you transcend this kind of duality? Well, you just simply learn to allow things to be as they are. Accept things to be as they are, and tell yourself that this is where things need to be, because this is what I need to take from this experience in order for me to develop myself. And for me, this is how it's been. I'll tell you a funny story. I'm making an instrument right now. It's about, I think it's a 2.2 Jinashi instrument. And you've got 5 holes on the Shakuhachi, and I marked all 5 holes. And lo and behold, I drilled the 5th hole in the front.
Oh my God.
So, hang on.
Oh gosh. So
here we go. This is through the plastic bag. You can see I've covered it basically. I've put the epoxy. I
Mhm.
started drilling it, and then I realized I'm on the wrong side.
Oh God.
Yeah. And so, what do you do in a situation like this? This was a reminder for me to kind of allow me to just let things be as they are. And I don't sell instruments. I make them for my own enjoyment, and I might gift them at some point in time. Who knows? We'll see. Um, but I figured, this would be a nice reminder of the beauty of imperfection, that this is the world that we are surrounded by, and we just have to appreciate things as they are.
Yeah, there's then again a lot to unpack in all that all those statements, and I guess I want to we'll start from the back end of that and go backwards. It's it reminds me of this the practice of kintsugi and filling things with filling cracked Tupperware with gold. And I think that the crack is a representation of like what we view as our flaw. And the flaw is actually the most golden part of it. It's the mistakes, the things that were not expected. And I think that's the moment of realizing how human we are. And it's really interesting. It made me remind me of a story. When I was in college, I wrote this piece for cello and piano, and there was this one part of the song that the cellist kept messing up, but it wasn't that she was messing up like by playing a wrong note or anything. She was just she played a different note in a different way, and I never told her that it was wrong because I liked it more. And so what's really interesting is sometimes that those mistakes can lead into something that's even more beautiful and more wonderful. And a lot of times, I think that she didn't even realize that she was making a mistake, but the mistake that she was making was gold.
That's beautiful. That really is beautiful. And it worked out in the end, right?
And it worked out in the end. After the concert, I told her, and then she was like, "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" It's like, no, because it was so good and I loved it. When there was one thing that we were talking about when you were saying how do we go over this kind of self-doubt, and I had two things that I thought about. One, you mentioned the duality, and I was sitting in a Dharma talk in Japan, and the monk was speaking, and then once he finished, and it was about good and evil, and somebody in the audience had we're all kind of sitting in front, like maybe about 15 of us, and he raises his hand and he's like, sensei, I have one question, like why can't we just use more love to defeat hate? And he says, well, that's one and the same. I mean, you can't use the same, like you can't beat fire with fire. The fire is love is a burning passion, and hate is a burning whatever. It's another type of fire. He says you have to use water. And so what is water? Water is wisdom. And so I think that sometimes when we go about this practice and we're trying to be self-critical, instead we always think this thing is we can't say to ourselves that we're always wrong, we're wrong, but we also can't lie to ourselves and say that we're right, because that locks us into both blocks. Rather, we should say, I can always be better. And that allows for growth. It doesn't have an end point, and it doesn't on either end. It doesn't say that one thing could get worse or one thing could get better, but it has a trajectory of completely going outward. And so I think that we do lock ourselves into that sort of duality often, because so many things are in pairs, right? We can only breathe out and then we can breathe in, but we also can hold our breath. So there's kind of that interesting intersection, but at some point, the breath's going to have to go out or in again.
Yeah.
So I think that's the thing with the motivation part of it, is using the right words and the right terminology I wouldn't even say terminology, right perspective, in order to help push yourself after having to establish the routine. I did want to talk a little bit more, go a little bit deeper into doubt, because I think doubt is, though we view it as this negative word, I think that we can actually use it in a very positive sense, because I think it's like doubt is a great motivator. Have you had any experiences with that? And eh, well, I mean, I guess you did tell a story about the shakuhachi with putting the fifth hole in the front, and that's like a reminder. It's a self reflection on other things outside of it. But I was wondering if you maybe had other examples that are maybe even more literal.
Yeah, yeah. Um, when we consider doubt, it brings up the idea of uncertainty. And when we think of uncertainty, then it brings up the idea of the lack of stability or security. And so, right now, living in Beirut, Lebanon, where from a day-to-day standpoint, where we're really uncertain of where things are heading and how things are, it creates a huge void in all of our lives. And my heart goes out to all the Lebanese people living here, because we are a time of uncertainty. So at moments like these, you just simply look deep inside yourself. Um, First, you breathe, continue on breathing. This is what I do. I breathe. I find myself breathing more. And teaching karate now, I always incorporate breathing, but I've found that many of my students are again running short on breath because of what's happening around us. And so we take pauses in between exercises to breathe. We do 5 to 10 cycles of breathing, and we're doing that. And this allows us to just focus our minds, our bodies onto the task at hand, because it's really simple, and it's really easy. Sorry, not simple. It's really easy to just be taken by the wave, and eventually we can drown. However, we're just trying to anchor ourselves as much as possible. Um, when you look at something, let's say musically, uncertainty of, again, your own ability, um, I go back to the idea of transcending this duality and just accepting things as they are, because that's where things need to be, and there's no need to resist it. Just simply go with it, allow it to take shape. Just simply gird yourself so that you're able to um, fully be part of this experience, fully engaged in the experience, and heighten your senses of awareness in order to fully understand, or not, but be fully engaged in what's happening.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's great. I think that's right on. And you, it's a doubt. I think doubt is also directly linked with fear. And we the great phrase is, or the saying is, fear is the greatest of all motivators. And but I think that because we're not using the word fear in the word of doubt, like we doubt our ability. Well, I mean, it's fear of not being good, doubt of the being in the right place at the right time. Well, that's fear of circumstance, and whatnot. And but all those fears should be, or all these doubts should be viewed um, as a motivational tool. The other thing I think about, this is one thing that Dr. Jordan Peterson talks a lot about, is lobsters and how they grow and all this sort of stuff. Lobsters actually fight each other, and when they do these combat fights and whatever, the lobster that loses actually becomes sick, and it actually kind of curls up and it keeps its claws down and it shrinks in size, and its dopamine and serotonin levels drop. And what they did, which is really interesting as a scientific study, is they would give them dopamine and serotonin, and they would start to erect their back more, and then they would be more powerful, and they'd feel like they could conquer the world. So it's part of that mindset. Another really interesting thing about lobsters, which I think is a really good self-reflection on people, or it's a good mirror image, is that when we're feeling really stressed and doubted, it's just really awful thing. There's lobsters do the same thing. Like as they grow and they get bigger, they actually get uncomfortable in their shell. And so what they do is they leave and they find a rock somewhere and they go under it for a couple days, and then they shed the shell and they grow a new one. And it's so anytime we feel that sort of stress and sort of that the doubt, or things are becoming too much, or there's a kind of a mental blockade, it's actually the meaning of that we're growing. So stress and depression and all these sort of things that we experience within the music is growth, and we just need to shed the shell. And sometimes it means just taking a couple days to reflect and review and take a deeper look at things.
Absolutely. And we have it in us to, in many ways, will the release of these serotonins and endorphins and these feel-good type of hormones and neurotransmitters. We have it in us simply by breathing. And
Yes.
when you inhale and exhale, you're oxygenating the body and basically raising your pH level, tapping into the pituitary gland, basically, and that itself activates the release of adrenaline into the body, and then the body begins to go into this fight or flight kind of a mode, and release things that make us feel better and allow us to cope with any situation. And eventually, when everything calms down, we're better off than before. And that's really important. Again, moving forward on the pathway of awareness and developing ourselves, our characters, and our whole existence as loving and compassionate human beings.
Another really interesting thing that I just thought about as you were talking, was that if you're ever like upset or sad, if you force yourself to smile, your mood will actually improve.
True.
It's
I agree with that.
and so they
Or,
but they did
take a
science.
loud laugh out
Yeah.
loud or something like that. Yeah.
And so the science behind it is that it's like almost like the way that your body has muscle memory, your brain has like a sort of neural memory. So when your muscle memory, or when you're smiling, the muscle memory kicks in of how that works and whatever, because we don't think about smile, we just smile. And it's related to the brain, like how our brain feels and then our body reacts. So if our body reacts, it actually works like it's a two-way street. So the way that your body feels is the way that your mind feels, which
Yes,
which goes
absolutely.
into a lot of other topics too, which is even like another really interesting thing. I know it's just all these things are starting to pop into my mind now. Another interesting one is that people tend to get more sick at hospitals because of the clothing that they wear there. The clothing in hospitals is quite degrading. You have you're weak, your entire back is open, and you have people don't feel physically good on top of having clothes that make them weak. And if they were in the wild in those clothes, they would be in really, really bad shape. So actually, the type of clothes that we wear affects our health and our mood as well, which is also really fascinating.
It sounds to me like we're due for a social reform of some sort.
Yeah, I think so. I definitely think that in hospitals they should use a different garment than the open back. I understand the practicality of it for the doctors, but it does make the people feel worse, because of the fact that they're completely open and weak and vulnerable to attack.
Yeah.
So I hope everybody sticks around for the next segment, which is next week. We're going to be talking about the importance of physical health and shakuhachi.